I'm a big fan of Vampire the Masquerade and of Big Bad Wolf's last game, The Council, so needless to say, I was pretty hype for Vampire the Masquerade Swansong. Did it deserve that hype? Yeah. It's got some extremely high highs and some lows. If you want to go in blind, and you should, my brief, spoiler-free review is as follows. Swansong is a well-written mystery adventure game with some great art direction and inventive mechanics. That said, it's heavily marred by some shortcomings in the animation department and by bugs. But I want to go deeper than that. I want to do an analysis of this game's strengths, flaws, mechanics, and plot, really dig in to what makes this game so special, despite some obvious shortcomings. A thorough analysis will require some spoilers, so if Swansong sounds like it would at all appeal to you, what are you doing here? Go play it and come back. If you're a little more on the fence, or if you've already played it, you're in the right place. To start, let me give you a general overview of what this game does really well versus not so well, and I'll get into more specifics when I talk about mechanics and plot. First, the good. The art direction is phenomenal. I freaking love the character design. Emem's first outfit is a showstopper, like they put it on all of the promotional material for a reason. I also dig Leysha's design. Galeb is sharp, but he's a Ventru, the ruling clan, so he's comparatively conservative in design. I can admire him, but he doesn't excite me. But God, the buildings you get to explore are a treat. Just beautiful. If nothing moved, this would be a gorgeous game. The World of Darkness has never looked so slick. That said, the facial animations, whoo boy, that is not good. This is a flaw shared with the Council, and for some reason I feel like it might be even worse here. This is absolutely a case of Big Bad Wolf having more ambition than they do budget or skill. I played this on a computer that's a couple years old, but still pretty good, and the frame rates are a bit inconsistent for me. There are some issues with loading textures quickly enough. I'm not like a graphics person. If a game is well written, if the art design is good, if the mechanics are interesting, I don't really give a shit about polygon counts or FPSs. But these graphical issues are distracting, even for me. Swansong is formatted like a choose-your-own-adventure novel, and I do mean novel. It's heavy on investigation, which in this game means reading files, reading character backstories in the menus to get a sense of the relationships. Well, as long as the relevant section isn't in untranslated French, which, yeah, I can read, mais je n'ai pas appris le français pour que je puisse traduire des jeux vidéo. Je l'appris pour pouvoir pêcher les hommes. The untranslated French, where you find it, is certainly not intentional. The developer is, of course, French, and I enjoy how very French the game is. Like, if you look for it, everyone in Boston has some connection to France, or is excited to learn French, or is comparing vampiric society to the French Revolution in a way that is endearing, let's say. Aside from that quirk, which isn't bad, it's just kind of funny, the writing isn't bad. I'm very picky about voice, and I thought the Council had some problems on the line level with that. But I didn't run into it with this one. The pacing is also pretty good, which is hard with 3 interweaving narratives. All of the characters get an arc, even if they earn a bad ending, which I wouldn't even begin to know how to do as a writer. I wish I did, because it's fucking cool. Here's the general plot. On the night that the Camarilla, a political faction, forges an alliance with a local chantry of Termere, blood sorcerers, the party commemorating that unification is attacked and everyone present is slaughtered. The only survivors are the fashionably late, and they are sent orders to flee to the nearest safe house. So the survivors huddle up at the Camarilla HQ until they can wipe hard drives, shred documents, and figure out who attacked them and neutralize the threat. 3 kindred, Emem from the artistic, passionate clan Toreador, Galeb from the imperious clan Ventru, and Leysha from the visionary and insane clan Malkavian, are sent on missions by the Camarilla's prince to figure out what happened. Was it their political rivals, the Anarchs, the Tremere themselves, the Second Inquisition? Or were they betrayed by one of their own? It's a mystery adventure game. There's no combat outside of QuickTime events. If you're expecting a successor to Bloodlines, That might be disappointing. However, I think it's a fair approximation to actual vampire tabletop roleplay, which is not the most combat heavy. I think this game does an admirable job of adapting Vampire the Masquerade V5 and the current lore. I am the person this game was made for. I am trash for a mystery adventure game. Like I say, I'm a sucker for this art design. I'm an even bigger sucker for a mystery with a body drop and rooms painted with blood. That's the stuff. There are two broad categories of things to solve in this game, which I'll call mysteries and puzzles. Mysteries are more like, what's really going on here? What are people's actual motivations? What should my goals be within this scene? Mysteries are solved by reading through files, listening to recordings, and by outmaneuvering people within a conversation. Especially high-stakes, combative conversations turn into confrontations. Succeeding in these boss battle-like confrontations are key to unlocking the biggest mysteries of the game. The second kind of thing to solve is puzzles. You already know what an adventure game puzzle is. Unlike most adventure games, there's more than one way to solve the puzzles. This is where the RPG mechanics come in. Maybe you use auspex to find a hidden key, or maybe you pick the lock. Maybe you dominate someone into opening the safe for you, or you could just use your hacking skills. But not every path forward is going to be available to you. It's going to depend on which skills you've chosen to level up. Interestingly, you probably won't be solving every single puzzle within a level. Sometimes this is because there's more than one way to reach a goal, and you don't need to reach it twice, of course. Or sometimes it's because that puzzle is the means by which you achieve a specific goal, which is then mutually exclusive with achieving other goals. Most of those puzzles involve finding a key, a combination, or a password, but not all of them. I enjoy how much the story changes based on whether, how, and in what order you meet your objectives. You can't and you should not take every path available to you. Quite a few actions require you to spend either blood or willpower, both of which are a little bit difficult to restore. That means you have to pick your battles. You can't pick every lock you come across. You can't dominate everyone you meet. Just because a puzzle is very hard doesn't mean there's a reward at the end of it. And there are some stupid, hard puzzles. They feel like throwbacks to old Sierra adventure games, which I dig. And you know what? When you're skulking around a crime scene, when you solve a puzzle, when you find a ghoul in an unexpected place, when you figure out who did it, that's the best feeling in the fucking world. There are very few games that feel as good as Swansong does when it's at its best. That said, as much as I love unfair difficulty in puzzles, there are additional factors that make the difficulty perhaps too frustrating. A lot of the levels require you to solve puzzles in a particular order to meet your objective, and if you don't, you won't get the outcome you were hoping for. You can restart a scene, but the game auto-saves as you go, and there's only one save slot. So if you mess something up, I guess you restart the entire level. And the levels are long, they're an hour or two of playtime, so if you fall at the last hurdle, that sucks. Next problem, you don't know what skills you're going to need for an upcoming mission. In one of them, I was told I was going to go negotiate with some people, so on the leveling screen, I bought the next level of Presence, a social superpower, and sunk points into skills to make myself a better conversationalist. Instead, I found myself unexpectedly dropped into a prison break section where I actually needed platforming and investigation skills. That happens a few times. You might find yourself halfway through a 2-hour-long level and find you completely miss-spec'd. I actually really wish they had let me level up after the introductory scene for each level. That would have set me up for success way more. As the game goes on, it gets increasingly buggy. The Red Salon level has a bug that makes a couple of puzzles impossible unless you speak to people in a very specific and unintuitive order. I had to consult a guide to get around it, and I ended up getting spoiled on a major twist while doing that. That sucks. All of these factors meant that I ended up replaying every level multiple times. I'd really advise you don't follow my example. Just accept failure on your first playthrough, enjoy a tragic story, and then use a second playthrough or more to try and achieve perfection. But accepting failure is a mindset I and a lot of players have trouble getting into. Like, my old favorite, Pathologic 2, is an art game that is about coming to terms with failure. It shouts at you to accept failure, and new players still find it baffling. Swansong also really wants you to accept your failures. In the first chapter tutorial, there are a few roles that you simply won't have the stats to win. It tries to condition you to accept losses. The save system also makes it impossible to save scum and get the outcome you wanted. You can restart the level, but obviously you're not incentivized to do that. I found myself fighting that design anyway, though. It almost makes me wish that I were better. I am adamant that games can be about more than power fantasies, about more than unmitigated success, but once you gamify a story, I want to win, you know? Nobody likes failing. That's not to say the developers don't succeed at doing interesting things with failure, though. In my first playthrough, as I escaped the Tremere prison, I freed Kurt, a dangerous fellow prisoner. I worked my ass off. I solved the hardest puzzle in the game to do it, and it was a mistake. He fucked my shit up, and you know what? I decided to live with that mistake the rest of the game. I earned that. I was kind of delighted that the story wrecked my shit. Especially in Emem's story, there were a couple of other spots where I worked hard, chose wrong, and decided to live with it. If I just didn't solve a puzzle in the correct order and didn't reach the goal I was going for, I usually just started the level over. You can't skip text until you have fully cleared a section, so if you have to restart, no skipping text. The jog pace is also a little bit slow, so on replays, Another issue. I actually tried firing this up on my laptop when my power and internet were down, just to pass the time, and the PC version, only available through the Epic Store, does not support offline play. That's inexcusable. Last, I was able to follow this story because I am very familiar with Vampire the Masquerade lore. Anyone who isn't is going to be spending a lot of time in the Codex, and honestly, I spent a fair amount of time in there too. I personally enjoy being thrown into the deep end of an alien world and told to swim, but not everyone does. These aren't deal breakers for me, but they're all going to be deal breakers for somebody. So, how is the story? In my review of Big Bad Wolf's last game, The Council, I said it was weird and ambitious, but fell apart in the last chapter. This one sticks the landing. The game is divided into scenes, with each scene focusing on one of the three main characters. So, for my analysis, I'm going to spend a little bit of time on each of them. First up, Galeb Bazory. My first impression of Galeb was that he was maybe a little bit boring, but I revised that. He really grew on me. I think in the very last scene of the game, it dawned on me he'd had my favorite levels and was probably my favorite character. One of his chapters, the murder mystery at Jason Moore's apartment, is one of the all-time great mystery adventure stories I've ever played. I want to analyze this level a little bit because it's so good, and I won't spoil who did it, but I will talk about a mechanical aspect to the game that is in itself a surprise and a delight. So if you really want to go in completely blind, stop here, really go play. So, this level has Galeb going on a mission to collect sensitive information from a Camarilla accountant, Jason Moore. The accountant has been murdered, decapitated. Hell yeah. God, this game has style. So you need to infiltrate a crime scene, get the files, and get out. While you play, you have a list of goals you can pull up. Once you retrieve all of the files, your goal becomes to go home to the prince, and you can indeed go home at that point. It would be in character to do so. Galeb is a stodgy, by-the-book guy. He's a loyal dog's buddy to the Camarilla, has been for hundreds of years at this point. His child, Beryl, is on the Primogen Council, an advisor to the prince, and Galeb is not, despite being the oldest vampire in the city. That is unusual, and it says something about his character. My impression is that he's respected, but he's not a major player in Camarilla politics. He's too honorable, too obedient, too damn tired to get involved in everyone's petty political games. It makes him almost gullible. He's easy to outmaneuver. It makes sense that he'd arrive at a murder scene with a mission to get some files and leave the moment the mission was over. But don't you want to know who did it? You can solve it and stumble across a couple of other mysteries, but the game at no point tells you that you should do this. You have to pay attention. You have to get curious and defy the interface a little bit. Almost every level has something like this, where there is a goal, but if you think, okay, I'm on this assignment, I have this goal given to me, but what do I want? What am I curious about? For example, in another level, Emem is told to recruit some Anarch allies in order to mislead and betray them on behalf of the Camarilla. Do you really have to do that? What do I need to do to give myself another option? What do I need to sacrifice? It's a cool trick to have this almost hostile tension between what the game tells you is possible and what you can discover is possible. It makes the game feel larger. It makes it feel like maybe anything is possible. There's a playfulness to that. There's a joy to it. And I think if the interface had instead laid out all of the possibilities for you, it wouldn't be half as fun. In the case of Galeb, more than the other two protagonists, who are more willing to pursue their own agendas naturally, it weirdly turned him into my favorite character to play. His sections especially reward going wildly outside of what he's told is possible, and the fact that he's doing that as this guy who historically does what he's told, that's fun. It gives him a depth, I think, to roleplay him pushing against his own flaws, pushing against people who have historically outmaneuvered him politically. It's subtle and it's very well done. I've seen complaints elsewhere that he really doesn't get a prologue of his own. He really only gets a final decision. But I feel like his story ends up running its course fully in gameplay. In Vampire the Masquerade V5 lore, elder vampires have this sort of increasingly strong biological urge to leave wherever they are and travel to the Middle East for mysterious reasons. They diminish and go to the west, as it were. The choice whether to stay or whether to leave is his prologue for me. You decide as the player whether Galeb has anything left worth fighting for in Boston, and that'll depend on player choices and just what you as a player value. Personally, I found that very satisfying. Also, at one point in the story, he gets half of his face burned off, and why hello. I haven't seen you around here. Are you new? He goes from a block of wood to me to suddenly, hot as fuck. I don't understand it, and I don't think I want to, but I love this elderly, uptight, crispy man. Next up, let's talk about Leysha. I liked Leysha. She's the most strongly noir-inflected protagonist, and I am an absolute slut for noir. She has the blackouts that are obligatory to noirs. She's a pawn in someone else's machinations. She gets her own crime scenes to investigate. Hell yeah. She's a Malkavian, which is the clan of vampires who are psychic. Leysha herself has powerful and accurate premonitions. But those premonitions come at a heavy cost to her sanity. I have mixed feelings about Malkavians. They tend to draw from fiction about mentally ill people rather than actual mental illness. And God, those stories can be really tired. I'm going to specifically analyze a major plot twist in Leysha's story, maybe one of the bigger plot twists in the game. If you're not up for that, I've included chapter markers in the description. Skip to Emem's section. Leysha has a daughter, Halsey, who accompanies her on missions. The moment I saw her, knowing that Leysha is a Malkavian, I said, Halsey's a hallucination. Your names are anagrams of one another, you have a few conversations with Halsey, and your stats are always identical to hers. For instance, you walk into a crime scene painted with blood, and this triggers a conversation with Halsey where you're both struggling. It is a lot of blood, and you're both vampires. It's hard for you to maintain control. In most confrontations, you can spend willpower to boost your stats. When you do that here, Halsey's stats always raise to match your own. So yeah, Halsey is a hallucination. This is barely a spoiler, it's so telegraphed. And you know what? I don't have a problem with having information that your main character doesn't know. It's a very literary technique. It's fine. However, because Leysha doesn't know that Halsey isn't real, they kind of have to cut the story in half. In one of the plot threads, she struggles to know what is real, and in the other, she struggles to free herself from the manipulation of others. The two threads do eventually merge, but it feels like they don't have enough space to fully explore either one. Also, one of the threads, the one about how she's being used, is just more compelling to me as a mentally ill person. I'm not afraid of losing my mind. My mind has been lost. My symptoms are unpleasant, but I know them cold, and I know the parameters of my limitations. There are no dark corners of my mind. But if everyone around me knows I'm nuts, if everyone knows they can treat me with impunity and no one will believe me or will believe I deserved it, then I don't know what you, a sane person of my acquaintance, are going to do with that information. I don't know what you are capable of, and from my direct experience, sometimes people are capable of violence toward me. That is scary. So when we take time away from a plot about that to dwell on what is real versus what isn't, as much as I love acid trip visuals, I just want to get back to the horror. That said, I'm basically complaining that it's not a different story, and that can be kind of a shitty critique. Evaluated on its own terms, as a story about someone who struggles with hallucinations, the writers do manage a trick or two I found inventive, so it's not badly executed by any means. What I do appreciate unreservedly, Leysha isn't wacky, she isn't random, her mental illnesses don't make her more dangerous than the other two protagonists. She's a very reasonable person who reacts rationally to the information she has, however inaccurate it is. Overall, I liked spending time with Leysha. I just wish she had a different plot. The third protagonist, the one on all of the promotional materials, is Emem. Can I be honest? Toreadors are usually not my bag. They can be stereotypical mean girls, and the moment I see anyone pull that shit, I write them off fully, and they become the most tedious person alive to me.
So you agree? What? You think you're really pretty?
Basically, all Toreadors are some kind of social or artistic genius. I don't think any other clan requires genius as a prerequisite in the way Clan Toreador does. And then what happens is normal-ass people have to play that at the gaming table. Now, the genius asshole is a venerable literary tradition. I wouldn't necessarily call him a Toreador archetype, but House MD features an indispensable genius asshole. That portrayal works for me, but he has the benefit of being written by a team of writers and then being played by someone with the charisma of Hugh Laurie. When you're at home playing a game and one of your coterie is a genius painter Toreador played by your normal-ass roommate, Doug, and Doug gets catty, my gut reaction is, fuck off, Doug, your scribbles suck. However, when I saw Emem in her red dress with the gold leaf, sold. That is someone who has sharp aesthetic sensibilities. In a move that feels designed to appeal to me personally, they also write her against type. She does not love the Camarilla. She's got strong ties to the Anarchs, and she's put in rough situations where she has to eat a few rats. I like that she has an edge rather than the oppressive opium den Oscar Wilde, let's all say something shitty about someone vulnerable and laugh on we that's stereotypical of Toreador. I like that she's a lesbian without saying, hi, I'm Emem, a lesbian. Her dynamic with her sire and ex, Hilda, is also fun. Hilda is a bit obsessive, but I think they complicate their relationship enough to mostly avoid the pitfalls of the evil, jealous lesbian trope. Plus, hey, you rarely see a fat redhead in a video game. Just putting it out there, if anyone ever needs a Hilda in one of their actual play sessions, hit me up. Next, I'm going to be discussing sexual assault's backstory, and while the imagery on screen will not be graphic, it may, for some people, be evocative. Feel free to use the chapter markers below in the description to skip forward as needed. You see some of Emem's history in flashbacks, and in one of them, she's held down and forced to consume another vampire's blood. In Vampire the Masquerade lore, drinking another vampire's blood bonds you to them. It makes you very docile and willing to do whatever they want you to do. Sometimes, when vampires are in love, they'll voluntarily drink from one another. Holding Emem down and forcing her to drink is treated very much like a sexual assault. There may have even been a sexual assault after the blood bond. That's left a little vague. I've seen other media critics who are very dogmatically against portraying sexual assault for any reason. I'm not personally on board with that. I don't love the message that something I went through is not part of the gamut of human experience worth exploring in art. But it is hard to get right, and if you fuck it up, the end product is a unique kind of shitty. This portrayal manages to be metaphorical enough not to trigger me, and the plot focuses more on the unexpected betrayals that come afterward. The way Hilda and the Camarilla fail Emem in the aftermath is absolutely horrific, and that's very sharply observed. Emem sees these traumatic flashbacks while trapped in a prison that sucks away her memories and identity. I'm not sure if it was intended as a metaphor. I sort of read it as a metaphor. Speaking as someone with diagnosed and at times severe PTSD, at minimum, I found it resonant. The idea behind the Tremere prison is that if you steal people's memories from them, they forget who they are and lose all motivation to escape. The fact that Emem's assault is one of those important memories that they took from her, the fact that she can escape without recovering it, and that it legitimately does make her less equipped to navigate her life and relationships going forward in the game. Again, very thought-provoking, very moving. Now, art isn't therapy, and art that sets out to be therapy is usually pretty shitty. But an assault and the resulting trauma is very isolating. It leaves you sort of hellishly alone. And sometimes seeing the trauma portrayed reminds you that you're not alone, that this is a human experience which other people share and understand. And you know, what more could you ask for from art, right? So yeah, Emem's assault is handled very well, I think. It informs her story without being her whole story. I think I've reached the limits of what I'm willing to spoil. I will say that all three characters had satisfying arcs. Even the bad endings felt right to me. In case it's not clear, I tend to get pickier about games and other media that I really, really love. And I loved this game. I'm really looking forward to anything that the developers do going forward. Sometimes you get the sense that game designers don't know that they can do anything. Like, they can tell whatever story they desire, make things look however they want. They make the physics. Big Bad Wolf seems to get that they're unshackled and they go big. However, as it is with the patches Swansong currently has, maybe wait for it to go on sale. If you've watched this far, thank you. If you could please leave a comment below, it tells YouTube to share this video with a wider audience, and I would really appreciate it. Thanks as always to my Patreon supporters, and I'll see you next time.